The parallels between the design and build of technology are very similar to the design and build in the construction space as well. And I got to explore this conversation with Eric Whobrey. He's the VP of Innovation at Arco and a managing partner at Arco Ventures. And one of the interesting things about his role and his responsibility as he's looking to figure out how to innovate inside of Arco and innovate inside of his industry, the design build space, is that there's this tension, right? There's this tension between making sure that the organization is rowing in the same direction, that there's efficiencies, that there's quality control, that everyone is doing good work the same way, but also giving permission to experiment and to innovate and maybe break the rules every once in a while. And I think this is a really big challenge, a big tension that a lot of construction firms face, a lot of engineering, architecture firms face, which is that how do we really think about the willingness to change and adapt and grow and innovate while we're still making sure that we're consistently delivering for our clients? I think you're going to love this conversation. So let's jump right in. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to hand it right over to you. Why don't you give a little bit of introduction to yourself, to Arco, and what you do on a daily basis?
Sure. Thanks, George. So I'm Eric Whobrey. I'm the Vice President of Innovation for Arco Construction, and I also run our venture capital arm known as Arco Ventures. So I have been here for about 6 years. And for context, Arco Construction is a design build construction firm. We operate all over North America. We've got about 4,000 people at this point, probably about 50 offices around the United States and Canada. So as the VP of innovation in a large organization like that, a lot of my time is spent in the gray areas of the business where we're trying to understand our big challenges and come up with creative solutions to those challenges, often through the application of technology, but not necessarily limited to that. So when I say gray areas within the business, a lot of times, I think this is business related, not necessarily construction related. A lot of times you will enter into a conversation between the legal, HR, and ops team, and they'll say, that is a problem. Let's figure it out. But no one of those three groups necessarily raises their hand and says, that's something I will solve. Part of the innovation group's responsibility is to find those areas and say, we will help solve this and help to bring those groups together, ensure that we're actually chasing those problems effectively and to come up with some productive change.
So in the old adage of the diffusion of responsibilities, like when someone's supposed to call the ambulance when there's an accident, right? And everybody thinks somebody else is doing it. You're actually the one that's going to call the ambulance.
Yes, that's right. That's a
Awesome.
perfect analogy. Yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, tell me more about the kind of gray spaces that you're interested in exploring right now, or it's something that you're seeing that's happening both inside your organization or maybe in the industry.
Yeah. So a lot of our gray area within our big organization can sound quite boring, but is very exciting to me. So a lot of things around data management and data quality are top of our priority list right now. That is often something that passes through a lot of hands through the life of a project or the life of an initiative, whether it's a construction project, us building something or something that's just being handled in the back office. There's often a lot of times where that will exchange hands and data will change frequently, and there will be 3 or 4 ways that it's entered into a system. So I think this is something that everyone in our industry is certainly feeling. Things are being digitized at a pretty rapid clip, and we're trying to figure out how to manage and maintain all of that in a way that can be productive for the business and isn't just an added burden to understand where all the digital filing cabinets are, right? So we're pretty involved in the cross-functional teams that are made up to try to get that right and try to make sure that we are implementing our systems and digitizing things in a way that is organized and thoughtful and productive. So I'm sure that's something that will make sense to anyone that listens to this that works at a construction company or in the construction space at all. Beyond that, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say AI in the first 5 minutes of this conversation.
Oh yeah, I've heard of this. Yeah,
That's it. Yeah, that's something that's come up occasionally across the board. We're definitely trying to educate ourselves on what it actually means to utilize AI at a construction firm or in the
Mhm.
construction space. I think people have gotten a little trigger happy with calling something AI. So really getting into a habit of asking what it really does, and how it works, and making sure that we are both exploring it aggressively, but thoughtfully and responsibly, so that we're not putting ourselves in a position where the latest shiny object is leading us down a path we don't want to go. So the innovation group in particular has been really involved in the kind of education and understanding of the space so that we can tap into it where it makes sense to us, in a limited fashion, to see where those areas of growth and expansion can be. So that's a big topic for us. I think beyond that, there's a lot of kind of integration and optimization work happening internally. And then there's a lot of exploration of different methods of building, whether it's through prefabrication, offsite manufacturing, volumetric, modular construction. Nothing that we've necessarily gone full steam ahead into, but we
Mm.
see it as a space that's impacting us and will continue to impact us as the industry moves more in that direction. So we're trying to find the right areas to kind of pilot and do some research and make sure that we're fitting into that correctly. And then we are a design build firm. So we have a lot of internal architecture and engineering resources, and we're really, really interested in the design and engineering collaboration space. So figuring out better ways to share information early on in the job that helps us get to shovels in the ground with a better plan and better decisions made all along the way that are tracked by all parties involved. So that's something
Mm.
that involves a lot of software. It involves a lot of process and decision making and documenting and communicating that really clearly. And that's somewhere that we're spending a lot of time and energy. And then on the kind of more forward thinking side of things, offsite manufacturing, prefabrication, modular, that's definitely a space that feels like in the future for Arco. I think robotics on the job site are also something that we're going to see more and more of, not necessarily as like Tesla's human form robot going out and doing the building work,
Right.
but supplemental and complementary robotics that can help to pull humans out of some of the harder parts of the job, and kind of be a human aided companion to work as opposed to a replacement of work on a job site. I think we'll start to see more and more of that. And that's something we're definitely interested in. And I already see, I mean, drones on job sites, drone flyovers are commonplace now. And that's something that I don't think is discussed too often as robotics anymore, but it is. I think it's just become commonplace, so people call it drone flyovers instead of robotics. So there's a little bit of a like the industry is getting more comfortable with that, and the technology is getting better and getting more kind of narrow and targeted, so that there are places that can really help in the short term without having to wait for the big autonomous robot that can do everything on its own.
Well, and I think, and man, I wanted to unpack all of those topics. So I'm gonna work backwards. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
so talking about the robotic space, what's exciting for me in that is both from a safety perspective.
Yeah.
There's so much opportunities for things that we could go. Oh, we could just do that with something that is um, either augmented or autonomous to create a safety scenario. But I noticed, and as a good innovator, you're using very key language that you don't want to have people feel like it's a threat for their value or their
Yeah.
jobs,
Yeah.
right? Because this is not what we're trying to do, but ultimately we are trying to create a safer environment that's more
Yeah.
efficient, that has better margins and returns if we can actually get the work done at high quality and on time, right? I mean, that's ultimately those are our motivators, even though it sounds like you're going to have a robot replace me.
Right, right. Yeah, and I mean, I have yet to see an instance where, uh, and eventually in 100 years this is going to be the case, but I've yet to see an instance where I'm looking at a solution and saying, "Yep, I no longer need a person involved in that."
Right.
It's still very much, to borrow a term from the AI craze, it's a human in the loop situation where you really need that involvement and engagement, and I do think that matters. I think it matters to make to make it more accessible to those that are needed to engage with it, whether it's the field people on the site doing the work or the unions that are involved in helping to understand how we train and hire and implement those kinds of things. I think it all really matters in how you describe it and understand it.
Well, and then moving back a little bit, as a design and build firm, what I love about design and build firms, just as a side note, is it feels closer to kind of what I do, which is design and technology firm, right? And
Yeah.
so as a design and technology firm, we are both designing, architecting, doing the strategy work, and also going and executing on building out those solutions
Yep.
to work with our clients.
Yep.
What's great about that is that I'm pretty bullish about cross-functional work and the power of getting people closer together that maybe have different craft or skills or capabilities, so that you can make decisions more quickly. And I
Yeah.
think that we see that in really sophisticated design build firms like yourselves. Is there's the ability to say, how does the designer, the architect, get closer to the teams that are going to be putting shovels in the ground,
Yep.
and make sure that if something needs to pivot, change, or adapt, which inevitably it always does,
Yes.
it's not this big change management circle. So talk a little bit about what that looks like, because I think there's a lot of parallels to the technology world that could be
Well,
brought into what
and
you do.
that's no coincidence. I mean, my background before Arco, I was in the technology world for the advertising and marketing industry. So
Okay, yeah.
I definitely have brought along a lot of that experience with me in managing software development teams. And Arco was by no means waiting for me to show up to do this, but I think I was able to put language to it in the way that you're describing. And that is, we are bringing those cross-functional teams together earlier in the process, so we can understand the dollars associated to a decision being made in a design in the design part of the process, right? And that's where the construction engineer that is going to manage the job down the road can really help to impact that in a way that's good for everyone. It's good for the architect, it's good for the owner, it's good for the people that are then having to execute. So that's something that we've tried to really instill in all of our project managers and project teams, that those fast feedback loops and understanding that communication is key and kind of keeping those feedback loops moving along is core to the success of the project in this fashion. Because if we said we're design build and then tried to run it like a traditional plans and specs job, which I think you do see in the industry, I think that happens.
Mhm.
It often leads to problems in every direction because you're trying to apply a traditional methodology to something that's new and in need of more attention and more communication. So we definitely have borrowed or gained inspiration from the technology world that has kind of created this agile methodology that helps to define some of those feedback loops and those iterative cycles. We're just trying to kind of replace a lot of the waterfall methodology of, we're going to decide up here and then way down here we're going to actually implement, and kind of condense that into something that everybody can participate in.
Well, and I mean, the reality is that you have to make some adjustments, right? Because you're building a physical structure, right?
Yes.
And so there is some, and you've got permitting, and you've
Yep.
got all these other things that will have these fixed milestones
Absolutely.
inside
Yeah.
the process. We've been working on a project recently that's kind of around the pole planning methodology, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's interesting because it's like, okay, yeah, there's flexibility in pole planning, and there's a cross collaborative nature to making sure that everybody's in the space planning together. But ultimately, you still have the it's going to be checked on this day,
Yeah.
and
Right.
the
Like,
owner wants to have it delivered by,
yeah.
so there's a little bit more concreteness to that, no pun intended, but that allows you but still working in an agile, respecting the other crafts that are in play, making sure that you're working around each
Absolutely.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where a lot of the, like, once shovels are in the ground, it does become more dictated by the schedule and by the
Yeah.
logistics of the job site. And if you've created a perfect process that says drywall is going to be installed on April 23rd, but the drywall is not physically on the job site, you're out of luck. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done beyond just the planning on the design and engineering side. And I do think that if you're already in that habit and you've already created those communication channels, then it does become more accessible once the job is started as well, because you're already in that process of communicating changes, understanding the impacts of them, and moving forward. So when those inevitably do come up, we have relationships established across the board that are able to adapt to that more effectively.
Well, and I think what's really interesting, you're a big firm now, right? Like, so when you're talking thousands of employees and even probably more within subcontractors and everybody else that you're trying to pull into this picture, there's some training or some language. I mean, that for some folks that are maybe coming in from more of a traditional mindset, that you have to kind of reframe, right?
Absolutely.
This is when you work here, it's different than
Yep.
maybe what you experienced before. So that even that is part of the innovation story, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of our work is training and education. And I do say, oftentimes our challenge is not in the technology side of things. It's in the communication, education, and empathy side of things. I think
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of times that this happened a lot in my early years at Arco, 5 or 6 years ago. I would go to a job site and just sit in a job trailer and ask a superintendent to tell me about his or her day. And I learned a lot from those conversations of just keeping my mouth shut and listening and asking questions and walking through a job. And I don't think that that's something on the training and implementation side that we do enough of. I think
Yeah.
there's another side of that experience that, like you said, I don't think it's unique to Arco. I think if you go to a job site that's run by a different construction company, you're going to run into really different processes and procedures, despite a lot of it being really similar. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
still pouring concrete, you're still hanging drywall, you're still doing all these things. The way it's communicated and run can vary pretty significantly. So there is a big part of our effort. And usually the way it works for us is we will go through the first couple of iterations and we will get really, really deep into the weeds with the superintendent and the project manager and the subcontractors, and just like pull apart every single detail that we can in order to build that playbook that we can then hand to a larger, whether it's the IT team or the talent and training and development team. We can hand that playbook to them that they can then execute at a greater scale. So that's where a lot of innovation efforts fit in, where they say, this needs to change. We have no idea how to change it. Can you help us discover that? And then we work really hard to discover and implement in a way that is accessible and scalable.
Oh, I love that. There's a design thinking methodology to that, kind of that diverging and converging, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
you're going to diverge to go collect all the data
Right.
possible to understand the context, the empathy
Right.
of the user, ultimately to converge back into now what do we do with it?
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of first principles thinking involved
Yeah.
there. That
Yeah.
is just um, what are the actual like break down the unit economics of like rating a subcontractor,
Yeah.
and what are the steps actually taken by all the individuals involved, and what does that mean for finding that information later, and what is the actual value of doing that as an organization? How can we answer as many of those questions as possible? That's where we spend our time.
Let's take a break to tell you about our sponsor this week, Crema, a design and technology consultancy. At Crema, we know that navigating through periods of rapid change and scaling can be daunting. Broken systems, misaligned teams, delivery delays, and gaps in customer engagement are just some of the challenges that can arise when growing like this. That's where Crema steps in. Crema acts as a trusted partner, helping you overcome these hurdles on your journey to becoming a tech-enabled organization. Crema is excited to announce 3 new services designed to empower your product teams. You may have heard of the product triangle: design, product, and technology. Well, we're excited to help you navigate all 3. First is our UX audit. This isn't just a review, it's a deep dive into the user experience to uncover transformative insights that serve as a blueprint for greater success. Next is our team assessment. This service helps you identify the strengths and gaps in your product team, arming you with the knowledge to excel. And finally, a code quality assessment. It's essential to ensure that your technology is not just working, but thriving. Our experts will enhance your code base to improve performance, security, and scalability. Ready to get the most out of your existing product teams? Visit crema.us today. and learn how Crema's new services can help you navigate your biggest challenges. Now back to the show. Okay, so then stepping one step further back, you talked about the, truly the operational side of this, the kind of necessity to have clean data, right? To just be thinking about how
Yeah.
do we make sure that we're collecting things in the right way, that it's getting used in the right way. Um, Again, that's both a people challenge because you have to get
Mhm.
people to adopt the rules of how data comes in, because the data is only as good as the way that you put it in. But ultimately, then it's also a tooling challenge, right? So how do you think about whether you're working within data lakes or you're creating, these database structures or the taxonomy around that?
Yep.
What are some of the approaches or some of the things that you found useful as you're thinking about getting better data in so that you can get better results or data out?
Yeah. That is a question I spend a lot of time thinking about. So great question. I think it is it's a constantly evolving and fluid challenge to understand the tooling you provide, the disruption that you cause, and the people that
Mm,
you engage with. So I think I have seen tooling improve at a kind of just a common looking at the industry. What tools do we use? Things like Procore and Autodesk have gotten better. I would say that's
yeah.
incremental and slow because they are big and slow, and they are
Hmm.
kind of the anchors of the industry. But I've certainly seen improvements made in a 5-year time frame where the usability of that has gotten better. I also think the expectations have changed of the people in the industry, where 10 years ago, they were being handed software, they were being handed tools and saying, you just have to use it. It's all we have to use. And whether they liked it or not, it was kind of the only option. We are definitely not suffering from that anymore as an industry. There's been a proliferation of tools across the board
Hmm.
for any type of activity that you are conducting for a design and build construction job. I would say to a negative impact, where now we have too many tools and there are too many point solutions. And
Yep.
you'll hear any leader of a construction company say, never show me a point solution again. Like, I'm looking to integrate and standardize across fewer tools. I think that's a part of the process. I think that's a pendulum swing in the
Yes.
direction of we need more tools. There's an opportunity there. The market of startups and creative individuals that are looking to capitalize on that are going to flood that area. And we're going to see the ones that really work start to bubble up to the top. So I think we're at the point now where we're really starting to see those things bubble up to the top. And sometimes that, frankly, is probably the easier part of the process. You see
Mm,
something that is standard and supported in the industry, and so then it's just a matter of convincing your organization that that's a good step to take. And then you take
hmm.
that out of the box. You may tweak it here and there, but that sell tends to go over better with the leadership organizations that are looking to keep things simple, and the people that are doing the day-to-day operations that are looking for something that really works for them. I think where the innovation group has really seen a lot of success in the last few years is in that space that is not supported by a big enterprise application. And that's where we've really focused on meeting our people in a place where they are helping to dictate how that interaction occurs. So it's not necessarily us saying you have to use the software that works a certain way that does it this way. We try to be really, really tool agnostic and find the thing that gets adoption first.
Yep.
Because once you have people understanding and building momentum around it is actually better to do things one way or a similar way, then the tool transition is not nearly as hard because things are happening consistently. And I think what we run into, we're a very entrepreneurial organization. We give a lot of responsibility to people at a very early stage in their careers and in their tenure at Arco, which is a beautiful thing that allows us to come up with really creative solutions to the design build construction process. The sharp double edge of that sword
Hmm.
is we
Hmm.
have 500 CEOs running around making purchasing decisions on what tools and software they use.
Yep. I heard it
So
coming. Yep. Yep.
yeah, that's a very real challenge we face. But frankly, I would have it that way than the opposite
Yeah.
any day of the week. So sure, it presents challenges, but there are challenges either way. And what that does is it creates a lot of opinions from people on the tools and how they're going to work. So where innovation spends its time is if there's not something that fits the mold, where someone says, I'm doing it this way, is there a tool out there? We will actually build the tool internally as a prototype to help get the muscle memory of I should do it one way. So instead of doing it 15 ways, we may build a prototype that has a 12-month shelf life, but the purpose of it is to get people moving in one direction. And
Hmm.
then once we have that established and that's a norm, there are two scenarios that tend to play out. One is that tool actually starts to grow and we have something we then support and maintain over the long term. Or more ideally, we have everyone on the same pathway and we then point them to a standard tool that can help to integrate into our other systems or is something that is maintained and sustained by a vendor or someone that can help us to kind of onboard and maintain that on the software side. But I think the engagement we have in how are you actually doing this work and how can we help to bridge the gap between we all do it a different way and it works for us individually to we can do it a similar way and we can get to a standard is where we're seeing a lot of success internally.
Well, and I think that that balance, maybe that paradox, that tension of holding we want to create consistency so that we can all be rowing in the same direction,
Yeah.
right? There is value in that. But also, we want to create space for innovation and experimentation that
Yep.
allows you to say, hey, we don't want to get stuck in our consistent ways and be doing the same thing. We have a mantra here at Crema that is, if we look the same 2 years from now as we do today, then we're probably on our way to being irrelevant or obsolete.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is not because like, hey, I want to just be shaking the bag all the time, albeit as the founder, I definitely do.
Yeah.
But the story I'm trying to say is we don't have to do it the same way forever. Now,
Yep.
that being said, we have tons of documentation and tooling and focus on saying, hey, let's make sure that we're all kind of operating our teams similarly, so that
Sure.
if you jump from this project to this project, you're not going to have like this onboarding,
Yeah.
hurdle that we have to deal with. Right. So
Yeah.
I think it sounds similar that you're holding that tension really well, where there's permission to experiment, there's permission to innovate, but also there's a drive towards, hey, let's not forget, in order for us to be profitable, efficient,
Yeah.
safe, consistent, and our clients are happy with the results of that,
Yep.
we need to be doing work in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic innovator's dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Like we are up here on the spectrum of projects that are successful. We're in the upper tier of successful companies now, and we need to look out for those that are disrupting things and
Yeah.
investing in that space, not with everything, not all 100% of our time and energy is spent there, but if we don't spend time there, then we'll be irrelevant sooner than we'd like to think. And you've made me think of a Mario Andretti quote, which is if you feel like you're in control, you're probably not going fast enough. And I
Mm.
think there's something to that in our industry where we want to be like just a little bit uncomfortable,
Hmm.
and we want to find those places that we can pick apart without being totally out of control, but still having some discomfort in like let's make sure that we're not resting on our laurels. Let's make sure we're not sitting back and letting the world come to us. Let's continue to push the envelope and see what we can do better.
Such an exciting place to be. Well, honestly, this is incredible. So as you think about, okay, so we talked about kind of this, how do we really think about making efficiencies in the way that we build our products, use our products, choose our products, right?
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
talked about there's this space for where we can innovate and be looking for what's next. And then ultimately, look for ways to create a safer work site or a new, maybe a progressive way of building our solutions, whether that's pre-built or modular, et cetera.
Mhm.
As you're thinking about your industry, as you're thinking about your company, where are there areas that people struggle to get it right? Is it some of the ones that we hear on a regular basis is user adoption. Like,
Mhm.
cool, you have a thing and nobody wants to use it because they
Yes.
see it as a threat, or they see it as like, this is, I don't know, I've always done it this other way.
Yeah.
Or there's a challenge of scalability. this works great for one team, one office, one project, but it's not going to work great for 4,000 employees,
Yeah.
right? Or there's a cost involved there. What are some of the challenges that you come up against, the friction that you come up against as you're doing
I,
this work?
I think adoption is challenge number one for our industry.
Yeah.
And I think that is usually, I run into this trap of a leader or an executive saying, "I'll send an email about it," and that will do the trick. Like if I just say we're going to do it this way, then everyone will fall in line and do it that way. And I think sometimes that can work, but in large part for a big organization like ours, where we distribute responsibility with great frequency, there's more needed than that. And I think that I said it earlier, that comes down to communication, education, and empathy. And I think
Mm.
putting people in a position where they can focus on the communication and education side of that and really be dedicated to how do we get this big ship from one to another way of doing things is where our industry needs more. And that is people. We need more people in those positions that are dedicated to that. And that's something that I think I've seen positive trends in that direction. I certainly have met more um, people in roles where they're more focused on change management and innovation in peer companies, and our team has grown, and I'm seeing an upward trend in that direction. But I think we are just scratching the surface. I think there's plenty more, and it's not necessarily something that I want to pour more money in people at the problem,
Yeah.
but I do think it needs more money in people. And I think finding the right people to put in those positions that may, having a blend of industry experience and implementation experience, and finding ways to pair those together and make them really work in an organization is still our biggest challenge. I think the technology has improved more than it has been adopted, and that's where I see the biggest gap.
The last maybe 4 or 5 firms in the AEC space, we'll just kind of keep that as generic as
Yeah.
possible, that I've talked to the, technology leadership or even the C-suite and said, tell me about what you're doing. And they show me these pieces of software that they've built in-house or that they've,
Yeah.
partnered with in some way. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Like how can we help? Or what's really the problem? And they're like, zero,
Yeah.
zero people
Yeah.
have actually logged in and used it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why? And what I mean, almost consistently, it is they've always done it a different way, and they
Yeah.
see this as a threat to
Yeah.
their future. They
Right.
don't see it as an empowerment. They don't see it as an opportunity to be better. They don't see it as a way to progress forward. They see it as you're coming for my job, and the only way that I can keep you from doing that is just not logging in.
Yep. Yeah. I think there's a secondary cause, which I have heard less of recently, but I talk to a lot of software vendors where they say the onboarding cost is a couple hours. I have to correct them every time. I say, even if you believe it's going to be a couple hours,
Yeah, right.
the perception is the end user you're trying to sell that to sees this as a 40-hour effort at minimum. They see
Yeah.
it as a week of lost time that they're going to have to find a way to carve out of their already overcapacity demand. And that's not reasonable. And they hear you say it'll just take a couple hours and you've lost your customer. So
Yeah.
I think that's something we run into a lot too. And frankly, the things that work are where you take your time and you dedicate it to them taking the time. And
Yeah.
you pair up with them. And that's difficult to scale and sustain because you're doing a lot of one-on-one work.
Sure. Yeah.
It does move the needle, and it starts to build like a butterfly effect of watching them get it. They're going to advocate for it to their peers, and their peers are going to care a lot more about what they say than what the vendor or the technology leader says. So there's some, yeah, it's a balance that I think we're struggling with as an organization and an industry
Yeah.
that will it will get better, but we need to invest in it now.
Well, and also, I mean, again, reminder that this industry, you find that a lot of the firms, the people that have been on the side of the firm, have been there for a long time, right? And so there is there's a low turnover, generally speaking, and so you get people that go, hey, this has worked. Why, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But
Yeah.
no, I think that's really exciting. that at least you're pressing into it, right? Because the reality is we could go, well, that's fine, just keep doing it. No, but inevitably we have to just keep pushing that a little bit further forward. I always say we're in the business of people. We happen to design and build software,
Yeah.
right? You're in the business of people. You happen to design and build, structures and buildings and whatnot. And I think that's the reality is it's about the people. And I love your perspective on that empathy, on that education, on that understanding of where's the real user challenge here.
Yeah.
And I think that's only going to take Arco further, your innovation further, your partnerships further. That's super exciting. So I guess on that super exciting note, what's something as you look at the horizon, you get the permission to look down and kind of figure out how to operationalize and create more efficiencies and, empower people to do their best work of their lives.
Yeah.
Ultimately, though, if you look up on the horizon a little bit, I don't know what that time frame is, like 12, 18 months, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is.
Yeah.
What do you get excited about looking ahead?
I think I get excited about this industry continuing to I see this industry continuing to thrive and doing it in really creative, interesting ways that I can't even think of now. Some of my favorite moments in this job are going to the job site and sitting and listening to a superintendent. They are the most creative people in our business. They're just constantly solving problems that have no solution to them with no time to dedicate to them. So I think we can talk about robotics, we can talk about AI, we can talk about automation. All of those things are very exciting, but I think there is going to be a pretty significant shift from the younger group of people that are coming into this industry and that are looking for ways to continue to grow and produce that we can't necessarily understand right now. So my answer is kind of a non-answer. Like, I'm excited to see what I didn't see. And I think that's something that is necessary for our industry, to have some kind of new, novel thinking around the way we do things and applying some of the remarkable technology that exists in the world today in a way that's accessible to the industry. So maybe that's the piece that is most exciting to me, is finding those connection points that take something like artificial intelligence conceptually and brings it to a practical application on a job site. And that is where I think in the next 12 to 18 months, we'll start to see things crop up that I imagine is already happening on a job site somewhere, that will start to gain momentum and show us this is a way we can do more with less. This is a way we can really help the skilled craftsmen in the industry to do their best work. And this is a way that we can continue to have a profitable, successful construction industry that's doing a significant amount of contribution to our world and our lives.
I mean, that's incredible. The unknown unknowns are almost the most exciting piece of this, which is, I think that the pace of change is happening even faster than ever, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so we get to be along for the ride. So,
Yeah.
hey, Eric, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for exploring this conversation with me. I loved how intentional Arco. It sounds like your culture, the way that the organization thinks as a whole, and then the role that you specifically, the unique role that you get to be inside Arco to kind of shape this, to connect those dots, to build those bridges between teams. That's exciting.
Yeah. Thanks, George. I'm certainly excited by it. So I couldn't agree more.
Well, I want to roll out the red carpet for you. Where can people learn more about you and your thought leadership, or about Arco?
Sure. I'm probably most findable on LinkedIn. I don't spend a lot of time on social media otherwise. That is my social media place. So I'm always happy to kind of engage there and talk with people and share ideas. I definitely do the conference circuit around the industry. So the Built Worlds and Procores and Autodesks of the world, I definitely spend time there, or the Arco innovation team does if it's not me. And I think Arco is a special place. So to learn more about that, there's the arcoway.com, and you can find there are a lot of one thing about growing organically really fast is there are a lot of iterations of Arco that you'll find. So if you see Arco in the name and it's not the oil and gas company, you're probably looking at Arco Construction. So feel free to reach out and plug into any of those avenues to learn more.
Awesome. Eric, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been such a pleasure.
Great. Thanks, George.
People of Product is brought to you by Crema, a design consultancy that helps forward-thinking leaders discover, understand, and execute on their greatest opportunities. Learn more at crema.us.